Welcome back, friends and family, to the second interview on the second day of the second week of our inaugural Parent Tween Connection Roundtable. And I am thrilled to have Renee Sinning, one of our trusted experts, with us. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Clarissa. Glad to be here.
Absolutely glad to have all of our trusted experts back. So Renee is founder of Teen Esteem Academy. She has a long history of high school education. She's walked some walks herself with her own kids. If you haven't checked out prior podcast interviews, she talks more about that there, but she's really focused on helping build up teen self-esteem. So let's just start from the basics. Like we all know, kids go through low self-esteem. It starts knocking off like by, ages of 8, 9, 10, even like before their hormone cycles really kick in. Give us kind of like your overall perspective on self-esteem and why it matters.
Yeah. So my overall perspective on it, based on, like, as you said, all my years in the classroom, but the coaching I do with teens, whether it's group or one-on-one, the root cause, no matter what the parents come to me for, whether it's academic or social or anything, the root cause always goes back to, or 99% of the time, and the kids that come to me, it goes back to low self-esteem in some area. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just the world that they live in, the comparison culture, the 24/7 social media. There's so
Absolutely.
many things that are impacting their self-esteem.
Yep.
In this day and age, even so much more than when we were kids.
Oh,
and
gosh, yes.
It's just the root cause. And kids spend like 8, 10, 12 hours a day outside of the home. And so all the messaging and the influences they're getting outside of the home, the parents just don't have any control over that because you aren't there.
Correct.
And so I'm super passionate about equipping parents with tools to help boost their self-esteem from within the home, because honestly, that's the only piece you control.
It is. It's the only one I mean, really, truly, the only thing any of us can ever control. Words are hard again today. The only thing that any of us can control is how we show up in a situation, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, and by the way, I do want to do a side note real quick for anybody who's watching. If you are in our Facebook group, I do have it open on my other monitor. That's what I was looking, just making sure that it was actually broadcasting live. Feel free to ask questions of Renee as we go along. So I just realized I forgot to say that at the beginning. So wanted to. So Renee, with regard to building our kids up in our own homes, and I would say even like for those of us who, I don't have my own children, but I know I'm an influence on several of my friends' kids' experiences. Right. You talked about, or in our primary conversation here, we're going to talk about acknowledging and validating. And then just for Parent Tween Village, we're going to talk about permission and consent. Was that the other one? No, body language and getting permission.
Yes.
Right. So that'll be the second part of our conversation. Talk to me about validating.
Well, acknowledging and validating, it's so important because, teens are teens and they have all kinds of emotions and moods. And a lot of times their emotions and their moods and their attitudes trigger us as parents. We're normal human beings. And whether it's something they did or it has to do with some of our old stuff of our own, when we get triggered by their stuff, their attitude, their one word answer, the door slam or whatever, we might respond with emotion. And anytime you meet emotion with emotion, we're not going to get the results we desire. And so building that connection, building that connection with your teen, or even just improving it or lessening that connection gap is so important, because when teens don't feel listened to, when they don't feel heard, when they don't feel seen, they shut down. And I hear it from teens all the time. Like I just taught a class last week through the teen court and I had 7 teens in it. And I hear it all the time. It's over and over and over. My parents don't understand. They don't listen to me. So I just don't tell them anything. And so what we can do as parents, because teenagers yearn to feel seen, heard, and valued. They literally yearn for that. And if they think their parents don't see them or get them, they just won't share and they'll go everywhere else. So acknowledging what your teens are feeling, letting them know that you see them is super important. So for example, your teenager comes home, you say, "Hi, honey," and you're so excited to see them, and they're, "How was your day?" "Fine." "Fine," or it sucked, or whatever it is. And right off the bat, they're at you, or they roll their eyes, or whatever it is. And then you can get triggered and just, make a comment or whatever. I mean, we all know, we've all been there.
Absolutely.
In our response, rather than acknowledging them and say, "Oh, it seems like you're frustrated," or, "Wow, something must have happened. I'm sorry you had a bad day," or whatever it is, but acknowledging that you see that they're feeling a certain way is huge. But then you want to follow that up with validating them. So for example, the frustration, they come home and they go, "Oh, I failed my math test." Well, I was a math teacher, so I said math, but "Oh, I failed my test and it's awful. It's a teacher's fault," or whatever. "Oh, that must be so frustrating for you." That's acknowledging them. "I know how hard you studied." That's validating. So you want to acknowledge their feelings, but you also want to validate them and make them normal. Or, you have a teenager who maybe they got in trouble and you took away their car keys, or you took away their phone, and they're ticked, right? Because they're like all stressed out now. And you can say something like, "Hey, I understand I can see you're angry. I get that. It makes sense that you're angry." And and you're just letting them know that, hey, it's normal. Yeah, you don't have to say it. Yeah, you lost your keys or your phone. But yeah, I see that you're angry and I understand. It makes sense that you feel that way. It doesn't mean you take away consequences, but it means you're acknowledging their feelings and validating them. "Sorry, you're so sad. I can see that you're sad. That was really hurtful what Sally said." I mean, so you want to kind of acknowledge what they're feeling and then validate it, but that doesn't mean you're changing anything. And you're also not fixing it, right? You don't necessarily want to give them a solution. The goal with acknowledging and validating is helping them to feel seen and heard and understood, because that is what's going to lessen the connection gap and the communication gap.
I can think back to an early crush that I had. The first time that my mom caught on that I had a crush on somebody. And somewhere along the way, I don't know, maybe it was somebody that I was dating at some point, like there had been a breakup. I was really upset. And I can very clearly remember her demeanor was one of like, "Oh, well, this is just puppy love. Like, this isn't what you're looking like in the long term anyway." And it was like, I remember feeling so hurt and so like my feelings didn't matter because, and I'm sure that wasn't what she was meaning to communicate. I get that what she was meaning to communicate was like, "Yeah, this sucks." And it's like, it's not like you were likely going to marry that person. But what it felt like was, you don't really know what love is, so you really shouldn't be that upset.
Right. Exactly. And what would have been different had your feelings been acknowledged and validated? Because a lot of times parents will say to teens, and this is the teens telling me this, that, it's not a big deal. You'll get over it. And, I remember when I was your age, this isn't going to last. And so we make comments that are not validating. And the kids really do, just like you said, they take that to heart, and they take that as, they don't understand me. So why would I share anything? Because my parents don't get me.
And I would even postulate, and maybe this is me getting into the semantics a little bit, that not only are responses like that not validating, I would propose that they are actually invalidating. Like, it's not a neutral impact. It's definitely has a much more significant impact than I think we realize.
Yeah.
So what's an alternative? Like, say somebody is navigating their first breakup with, of a romantic variety, and like that, you want to look at them and be like, "Dude, this is nothing." And like, that person was rotten for you anyway, right? Like, that's not going to get us the result of the kid. I guess I back up. I also think we need to keep the long-term in mind, right? Like, how do we continue to establish that we are that place that they can keep coming to with this that we think is such a juvenile concern? But if we diminish this, it's going to have more impact where they won't come to us for the things that are less juvenile, right?
Yeah.
So what's another alternative when it is something that you just want to be like, they were bad for you anyway. Like I was on the receiving end of that one.
That's right. Well, you just can't show up that way as a parent, right? You just have to almost put yourself in their shoes and recognize that if it's big for them, it's big for them. Like this is a big deal in their world. And so you have to almost step back out of it because, yeah, as parents, we often know best, right? Not always, but often. We can see the big picture. They can't. So remember that too. Their brains aren't developed. They don't have emotional regulation. They can't see the big picture. Like they just can't. Their brains aren't developed. They're living in the moment, and it's this moment that matters. So as the parent, you really want to just be there for them and listen, right? Unless they're asking you for advice, don't give it. Just listen. It's the acknowledging and validating. Hey, I can just that's so hurtful. I'm so sorry you have to go through that. Life is so hard sometimes. I remember when I was a kid. Or you could come up with a story. If you have a story from your past, not comparing, you never want to compare your past to their present, but
Their experience.
a story to compare the feelings that you had. I remember when I went through something like that, and it took time. It just took time. And, just letting them know that you do see them. You almost don't want to use the words "I understand."
Correct.
Because then they're going to be like, you don't understand, because it isn't the same. And we actually don't understand what they're going through because we all feel differently. But I remember something similar happening to me, or, sharing a story or just something you saw on TV, or depending on the situation, of course.
Sure.
But
right.
It goes back to the acknowledging and validating. They yearn to feel seen, heard, and valued, and they don't necessarily want answers. So the more you can show up in that manner as a listener rather than a fixer, right? They don't want to hear that this is temporary and you'll find someone better, because that's not going to make them feel better. They want to know that their feelings are normal and that this sucks, and that you know that this sucks, right? That's what they need to know from you. And anything beyond that is kind of on their terms. Right? Let them open the door. And if they open the door, go ahead and step in. But if they don't, and also give them space, right? They don't necessarily want to talk about it. They need space. So if they want to go to their room and cry, or, those feelings are normal. And we want kids to let out their feelings rather than pushing them down. So giving them space to breathe, to digest, but you're kind of letting them know that you're there for them. They don't always want to be asked, are you okay? I just had a call with one of my teen clients this week, and they got into an argument with their parents because in the mom's view, the girl looked upset, like super upset and depressed. So she asked her, what's wrong? And then that just didn't go well, because nothing's wrong, because it's how they like internalize it and their perception of what we're saying. So the words that we use, we want to be careful of our language. Does that make sense?
So then what could an alternative be like for that teenager? Do you know what a different alternative for that parent might have been? Like, okay, the kiddo looks upset. What's wrong is a reasonable question in my mind. Like, if you look upset, like, Renee, what's wrong? Right.
Right.
What's some other language that parents could incorporate that isn't necessarily as like clearly negative, but like,
reframe it in a way, kind of like, hey, it looks like you look a little bit upset. Is something going on that you'd like to talk about? But then if they say no, then you have to just go with it. Say, okay, that's fine. Just, I just wanted just checking your mom, but if things like what's wrong or what's going on, or you look mad, or you look sad, like those kind of statements are going to make them automatically defensive.
Right.
So we have to just be careful with language, and we could have the perfect language and they could still be defensive. I mean, that's the truth. We're talking about teenagers.
I was going to say hashtag because teenagers.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, and this particular teen is 14. So she's in the throes of like hormones and, all of that stuff. And also remembering as a parent not to take things personally, because they're teens and they're just all in their own stuff. And it's usually not about you, their responses. So it's like kind of keeping aware, like, how am I showing up? And okay. And a lot of times they don't want to talk, but you just want to open the door so that without, and such a big piece of it, Clarissa, really is not feeling like you have to fix their problem, because that's what parents do. And that's what we want to do. And they don't want to hear that. And as soon as you start down that road, if your teen isn't open to it, they are going to be, oh, you're trying to tell me what to do, or, you know, whatever. And so, yeah.
Go ahead. And then I've got a thought.
No. So just like it's the language, and it's almost like, you know, we shouldn't have to monitor what we say when dealing with teens, but we do if we want to get a certain response. And so it's also asking those open-ended questions, not those yes/no questions. What's wrong? Nothing. You could say something like, hey, how are you feeling today? And you might know something wrong, or I'm just drawing a blank right now, but open-ended questions to kind of pull it out of them, rather than, because anything that's going to give them a one word, that they have an opportunity to give a one word answer, good chance you're going to get it.
Correct. So I had a thought about within the construct, as you're talking about, of acknowledging and validating. Actually, two thoughts. First, acknowledging, sometimes even we as the adults, I feel like, struggle to name the emotion that we're actually feeling.
Yeah.
And so I know one of the things that we've referenced before in other parent tween talks has been like an emotion wheel. For anyone who's listening, if you're not familiar with it, Google emotion wheel. You'll come up with 1,000 options. But basically it digs in like with some of the, 5 to 7 core emotions. Like as you get farther out from the core, the words become more nuanced and more like the semantics do start to matter a bit more. And one of those, I don't know if you've seen this, but do you know Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown?
I have that book. Yeah.
Yeah. This is, for anyone watching or listening, this is not a book to be read front cover to back cover, but it's a great book to go in and be like, okay, well, what's the difference between feeling stressed and feeling overwhelmed? Like as adults, we may have defined these terms, but the kids may not have. And so, do you have suggestions on, so like the emotion wheel and the Atlas of the Heart, those are 2 resources. But it seems to me that in the process of acknowledging them, being able to increase our vocabulary around the emotional or the emotions you can feel can help them. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I use the emotions wheel all the time with my teens, and I just did it with a teen client like 2 days ago. And I showed her examples of 3 emotion wheels because she was angry about something. And so, and we talked about that, because on the emotions wheel, you're right, the innermost, the core, those 6 or whatever, or it's easy to say I'm angry, right? But a lot of teens, if you go below that, the 2 outer rings are their true feelings. And that's where they have to be vulnerable, which can be hard, right? And so as a parent, the kids might not even go there with you because it's hard enough for them. Because a lot of times feelings of anger, for example, are really feelings of inadequacy or fear or comparison or hurt or something else. So, but I love that idea, Clarissa. And my teens love the emotions wheel because they recognize that they don't really understand those deeper feelings. And so as a parent, you could just print an emotions wheel and give them to them and say, hey, this is just for you to kind of figure out what you're feeling. It's not like they're probably not going to want to talk to their parents about the emotions wheel. But they also don't really know why they're feeling the way they feel because their brains aren't developed. That's truly why they can't pinpoint it. But if they can pinpoint it on their own and they have a couple of those wheels just sitting on their desk, it's going to be easy for them to process. And then they might come back to you and say, hey, this is what's going on. Some kids are never going to talk to their parents. They just don't have that relationship, and it's weird for them and they just don't want to, but other kids do. And so, but regardless, having them being able to pinpoint their emotions is just huge for them. And that can help open up conversations, because you're probably, as a parent, not going to go to your teen and be like, hey, I can see you're feeling inadequate. Like, you're not going to do that as a parent. or
Right.
I can see, you're feeling betrayed. You're not going to do that as a parent, but those are words on the outer rings of the wheel. And they're just, it's very vulnerable for a kid to admit that. But for them to be able to pinpoint that will help them to maybe open up those conversations on their terms. So as a parent, what can you do? It's in you showing up again. It goes back to acknowledging that you see their feelings and validating that their feelings are normal. That it's okay to be angry. It's a normal human emotion. It is okay to be angry. You just don't want to get stuck there. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be overwhelmed. Normal human emotions. So normalizing their feelings, but also validating or acknowledging that you see them.
Right.
Really key in building up that connection, which is boosting their self-esteem. Because when we go emotion with emotion, when we get triggered with our stuff, then it's about us, and it actually isn't about them at all. But it doesn't take much to chip away at teen self-esteem. So
absolutely.
So as parents, it's like, what can I do? What are the things within my control right now that I can do, kind of where they don't even know that I'm doing it, to help boost their self-esteem?
One of the ideas,
place to fall.
Right. One of the ideas that I have now that our foundation actually is in existence, according to the IRS, we're going to start like with some merchandising. One of the ideas that I've had is actually an emotion wheel that's like magnetic, that we can take like almost like little Monopoly characters, like one for each person in the family. And you can be like, hey, today I'm feeling, and like everybody can do it. There doesn't have to be any questions or anything involved, but like today I'm feeling inadequate, just to take the word that's in my brain, right? So like I could put like my little emoji magnet on the inadequate, and my partner could put theirs on the grumpy, and the kid could, kid number one could put it on angry or betrayed. And then at least it's a case where like, okay, there's another nonverbal communication, because to your point, the kids don't have the brain to necessarily, like, it's just not developed yet to always explain it. But sometimes just being able to be like, I'm kind of putting my flag in the sand on this color because this is where I'm at today.
Yeah.
That could be in both directions. Hey, mom, how come you're feeling inadequate today?
Right.
Right. Which is the other way. Sometimes like they need to see us as the adults being vulnerable before they feel comfortable being vulnerable as well, Yeah.
Yeah. I love that, Clarissa. And the teen might not go, like if they were doing that as a family, the teen might stick with that inner circle. Sure. And just be angry because they don't want to show the other stuff, but just seeing what other people are doing, they could be doing it in their own mind. Yeah, I think the emotions wheel is so powerful. And I tell the teens all the time, like, I'm going to show you a few of them. If these don't resonate with you, Google it, because there's all kinds of emotions wheel that might have the words that you like, because different wheels have different words. And usually, like when I'm doing an exercise with them, I have 3 that I found that I kind of like. And so I'll do all of them. I'll put one up at a time and say we're talking about a situation where they were angry. We'll look at one. They might find like 1 or 2 words from that wheel, but then we'll go to the second wheel and the third wheel that have different words. And so then they can express it even more, right? Sure. That you might not catch it on one wheel. And it's super helpful for them, because the one teen I was working with just a few days ago, I said, what are your action steps for this week? Like I always let them, because it's coaching is about action. What do you want to work on this week? And her response was, and we had done multiple things, so that wasn't the only thing I shared with her on the call, but she's like, I want to look at use the emotions wheel, and like as I'm going through my week and kind of figure out what's going on. I thought that was awesome. And that was her only action step of the week.
Hey,
something
that's
she
fabulous.
And so I sent her the 3 of them, and so I'm excited to talk to her next week. But yeah, they want to know why they feel the way they do. They don't want to be angry. They don't, but they can't always verbalize it. And it can be hard to talk about, and it can be really vulnerable and scary. It can be scary to say, I feel inadequate. But then once we have the word and we know how they really feel, then you can really kind of dig in and help them to look at things from different perspectives and such. But again, the parent piece, you can just do what you can do. Right. And so the acknowledging and validating are 2 things you can do every day. I don't think you can do it too much. Like any chance you get to show them that you see them and you understand and they're normal is like an opportunity to lessen the communication gap.
Absolutely. All right. So you know the drill with this. As often as I remember to ask, I like to ask all of our guests, even those of you who've been with us before, which of the foundations of connection rings most true for you or resonates most true. So for anyone who's listening for the first time, all the letters of connection represent the first letter in each of these phrases. And you've heard Renee talk about the connection gap several times today. So C is create a safe place, then observe, non-judgment, nod and smile, as in like zip it, which we've talked about today. Explore, challenge your truths or curiosity, take your time, innovate, own your own story, and nurture. Which of those do you feel like is coming up either most for you and what you're seeing with your kids, or like relative to the conversation we've had today?
Are you talking to me, Clarissa, not just the general people?
Yeah, nope, that's to you. Yes.
Obviously, connection and creating a safe space. I just can't stress how important I think that is, because we want teens coming to their parents. And then the non-judgment piece is huge, because so many teens feel like they're being judged, not only from society, but even from their parents. Right. And again, it's usually inadvertent and we don't mean anything by it, but it's our words. Words have energy, and they are in our words and our thoughts. They either work for us or against us. So we really do want to monitor what we're saying. Not that we want to be walking on eggshells, but we really want to be careful with our words. And so acknowledging and validating are always positive. So yeah, so those are the big ones. Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up our main conversation in our Facebook group to YouTube and to LinkedIn. And we're going to go have a secondary conversation with folks in Parent Tween Village. We're going to be talking about body language and getting permission, which are two of the next steps to building self-esteem from within the home. So thank you, Renee, for joining us, and we'll see you in Parent Tween Village momentarily.
All right. See you there.